We are back. Someone can send us a note if you can see and hear us, that would be fabulous.
Can you hear us? If someone could just type in a yes, and then I will just introduce our speaker. Okay, I think it's working. Okay, great. I apologize if anyone missed just my introductory remarks, but it's really to set the stage of Americans for Ben-Gurion University and our vision. And I'm sure our speaker, Professor Ben-Porat, can probably touch on that during his remarks. But Professor Ben-Porat is the immediate past chair of the Department of Politics and Government at BGU. His research and publications engage with Israeli and world politics, peace processes, religion, and ethnicity. He teaches courses on international relations, globalization, religion, and politics, and policing. Born in Israel, Professor Ben-Porat earned his undergraduate degree in political science and psychology from Tel Aviv University. And he earned his doctoral degree in political science from Johns Hopkins University. In addition to his scholarly work, Professor Ben-Porat has worked as a journalist for a variety of newspapers. I look forward to hearing from Professor Ben-Porat about what happened in Israel during the most recent round of elections and what we can expect and look for next in Israeli politics. As an aside, I was actually coincidentally in Israel during the elections, so I'm very interested to hear from the professor. So I now turn the program over to Professor Ben-Porat, and thanks everyone for coming and bearing with us as we deal with technical issues.
The sound is great on my headphones, so you might be able to use the microphone.
So standing here like this is good. Okay, so thank you everyone. Great to be in Baltimore again. We spent here 3 years in the 1990s, so I'm very familiar with the city. I have a daughter who was born here, so another connection. We used to come swim here in the gym, and she used to eat lots of cookies in the kindergarten here. So I owe you many cookies. So I hope this repays some of the debt I have. So the Israeli elections. Let me begin with saying that prior to the elections, the polls had a very difficult time in deciding what's going to happen.
The mic, we can do that.
Tell me what to do.
The mic is perfect. Let's try.
Okay, sorry about that. So going back to what I said, the election result was in some ways surprising due to the polls were predicting a tie or a very narrow win to either side. What we did get is a very comfortable result for Netanyahu with what seems to be like a stable coalition. Try to explain what happened and what are the consequences, and you can move to the next slide.
Recording in progress.
So if we look at the...
Let me just mute this.
Hold on a second. Yeah, we're going to mute that.
Okay.
We're just waiting for that to be muted.
Yeah, I mean.
Perfect. Continue.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Should I go on? Okay, apologies again. So when we look at the election results, here is the so-called paradox. If you take the Netanyahu bloc and the anti-Netanyahu bloc, they're almost similar in numbers. So Netanyahu, if this is a popularity vote for Netanyahu, he was leading by about 30,000 votes, a very small margin. However, in practice, this translates into 64 seats in the Knesset, which is a comfortable coalition. Let me try to explain why this happens. Can I get the next slide, please? So let me say a few words about the Israeli electoral system, which I'm sure many of you know, but just to be sure that we're all on the same page. So Israel is a proportional representation system. People vote for a party, not for a leader. So we put one vote in the envelope, which is for a party, for the Likud, for the Labour Party, whatever, not for the leader. The Knesset has 120 seats. 61 will give you a majority. Okay, that's how this system works. But what happened in this election, however, was something very, very unusual in terms of predictions. Can I get the next slide? So when we were counting, how is the counting done? When the ballots are casted, you take out the illegal votes. So in the end, we have 2 notes. It's discarded. People that write instead of putting the notes, it's discarded. So these are discounted. A more important discounting is parties below the threshold. So a party does not reach 3.25% of the vote. These votes go to the garbage. They are discarded. Then they take all the other votes, divide by 120, and that's what a seat in the Knesset is worth. So if you had 100 people voted, out of that you had X discarded, the rest is divided by 120, and that's the number of votes per seat. Now, after you do the counting, and we know how many seats each party has, then comes the role of the president. The president will meet with all parties, hear from them who they recommend for prime minister, and he will give the leader of the party with the greatest chance to form a coalition. He will nominate him to try and form one. It doesn't have to be the largest party. It could be a small party that has a large coalition, and he will get from the president the role of forming the coalition. The president has a very big role here, at least in some instances. So when we go into this election, what we have is the legacy of the failure of the former government. The Ben-Lapid government, who was very unusual, I'll talk about it later in its makeup, had many resentments against it, which caused it to collapse and brought in a new election. However, the Lapid former government has failed to organize to this election. We had 2 camps. Netanyahu, who came very organized and very effectively maneuvered all the parties to the right of him, while Lapid failed to do the same to the parties on the left. And that's why 2 parties did not cross the threshold, the Meretz party and the Ballot Arab party. That's about 300,000 votes that went down the drain. That explains the difference. Almost similarity in the pro and against Netanyahu, but in terms of members of the Knesset, Netanyahu has a 64-member coalition. Netanyahu did 2 things very effectively. One, he legitimized the extreme right-wing parties. The right-wing party in the coalition now is a descendant of the Kahana group. This was a party that for many years was an outcast. Even the Likud would not sit with the Kahana group. Netanyahu legitimized them. And he discredited the Arab parties, which gave Lapid very small room to maneuver. Netanyahu came very prepared to this election, and he has a new government, which is made of the Likud, the largest party, the ultra-Orthodox, two parties, ultra-Orthodox, Shas and Torah, and the religious right, the extreme right-wing party. So this, from the narrow perspective, seems like a stable government. It has a 64 majority that agree on many things, and nobody has a better option outside the government. However, this government is still exposed to many pressures that in the near future might hamper its ability to stay in power. So when we look at the agendas of this election, there are 5 agendas that I want to talk about, especially about 2 of them. One was, is Netanyahu fit to be prime minister? I said before, this election is not about personal, but about parties. But that's only true formally. In practice, for the past 2 years, we're debating, is Netanyahu worthy to be prime minister? He has, at the moment, a trial going on with accusations of corruption. The anti-Netanyahu camp says he is not fit to be a prime minister. He should go on the trial, and after that, maybe. As long as he's on trial, he cannot be prime minister. Netanyahu camp says he is absolutely fit, he's the best candidate, and this trial is a scam against the government, and there's no way that we should accept that. So it's the kind of deep state story that people are against him, but that's the main debate, Netanyahu and Netanyahu. The second debate, which I think is going to become very important in the coming months, is the issue of religion and politics. This issue has been not very important in the past 2 or 3 years. I think it's coming to the fore now. And I'll talk about this in a second. It'll be a very, very important debate in the coming months. The third debate is the Arab citizenship question. That is, how do we deal with the Arab minority, their demand for inclusion, and their place in the Jewish state? That's another major debate. Fourth debate is the economy. Now, if you take Lapid and Netanyahu, in terms of economic view, they're not very different. Netanyahu claims to be the major economist, the miracle maker, and he can take the economy to the next level. And Lapid has failed to face the current crisis of the economy, the world economy. It's not been a very important debate, but it's there. And the fifth agenda is the Palestinian question, which is off the table. I mean, neither Lapid nor Netanyahu have any intention of dealing with this problem, and it's pretty much been evaded in the debate. Netanyahu blamed Lapid for being too leftist, going too far in compromises, but in practice, the Lapid coalition, if it would have come about, would have been a quite center-right coalition, unlikely to do anything radical in this front. So this was a debate that was in there, but not very important. Next, please. Let me begin with the issue of Arab citizens. And I think this is an issue that we've been talking about in the past years. I'll explain why in a minute. And there are 2 major trends among Arab citizens. These have been described years ago. One is Palestinization, which Arab citizens of Israel are becoming more and more identified with the Palestinian cause and identifying themselves as nationalist Palestinians. But the other trend is Israelization. At the same time, Arab citizens are integrated economically, socially, in the workforce. And these 2 things are happening simultaneously. So when you look at Arab citizens in the past 20 years, they've become more integrated in some sense. You can find them in the industry, in academia, in other places. Their income has grown. They've moved up to the middle class, but they've also become much more concerned with their identity. What is my place in the Jewish state? Can I ever be an equal citizen? So on the one hand, there's growing alienation. Many feel that their state will not accept them. They'll always be second-class citizens. But at the same time, they also want to be included. We do want to be part of the state. We want to improve our living. We have these pragmatic concerns. So the Arab society of Israel, its concerns are equality and inclusion. And the question is, will they be able to be included in this country? And one of the issues that come about is the issue of policing. I've been dealing with that for many years, and Arab citizens, one of their major concerns is growing crime inside Arab cities. Just to give you the numbers, Arab citizens are about 20% of the population. They account for about 70% of the murders in Israel. So 3 times their size. We're talking about villages and towns which live in constant fear from gang, from illegal weapons, and from many other things that make their lives very, very miserable. And when we do research of Arab citizens, what we found already 10 years ago, a concern of under-policing. And this has been kind of in the beginning, it was a bit strange to us. They're Arab citizens. They have lots of resentments towards the state, lots of grudges, but still they feel that police is not present enough in their neighborhoods. And the answer is very simple. The level of crime and violence has grown so rapidly that it became the major concern. So while Arab citizens might have suspicion of the police, might have bad memories from policing, their immediate concern is safety for themselves and for their children. And this trend has been going on for about 20 years. And you can think of that as the process of modernization. So 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was a traditional society that tradition has made life more stable. So police was absent, but the society was able to contain violence by itself. What's happened in the past decades is a decline of traditionalism. The elderly, who previously had some authority, don't have it anymore. You have the growth of unemployment, of youth going astray, of illegal weapons, and of gangs, and the police is absent. Now, until 2021, this was a minor concern for most Israelis. It's a problem of the Arabs. I might have sympathy for that, but doesn't concern me. I feel safe. In 2021, it did become a concern for other Israelis because violence spilled over. It was like the operation in Gaza in May 2021 brought into Israel a clash between Arabs and Jews. And in those mixed cities, the violence spilled out. So suddenly the issue of Arab violence, of illegal weapons, became a concern for everyone. And the right wing, especially the extreme right, was able to capitalize on that. A bit like in the US, the soft on crime debate. So you feel unsafe, Jewish people, the roads are unsafe. We have Arabs that are a threat to everyone. We have the solution. More officers, a more restrictive policy, more jails, more guns. So the right wing, part of the reason why they got so many votes is the concern of personal safety. So I was saying before, this is a party that represents the extreme right, the Kahana group. They were blamed for being racist and for good reasons. But people voted for them, not necessarily for accepting racism, but because of fear. These guys might have the answer. So if they promise they bring security, I vote for them. So the Arab citizens have become like the targets of the problems of insecurity, and the right wing was able to capitalize on that. And if we can learn from other countries' experiences, the solution proposed by the right of more guns in the streets, more gun licenses, and more police officers, and more authority for police usually does not solve the problem. Now, Arab citizens, interestingly, these elections, have had 3 parties that came with very different agendas. One party was the Ram party, were the part of the Lapid coalition. Mansour Abbas, 3 years ago, came up with a very new approach. He said, I represent Arab citizens of Israel. I'm putting aside the issue of the Palestinian question, foreign relations. I want to improve the lot of my people. I want more security. I want better education, better infrastructure. And I will sit in the government with anyone who will be able to deliver that. Even Netanyahu. So before the last election, before the last coalition, Netanyahu had a meeting with Abbas. He later denied the meeting, or said it was just, informal. But apparently Netanyahu promised Abbas, if you come with me to the coalition, I'll give you whatever Lapid gives you. So Abbas said he adopted the model of the ultra-Orthodox years ago. I have an agenda, which is about my people. And here's the coalition formation, make me an offer. And I'm willing to take it. So putting aside the Palestinian question, I will not deal with that. I want to get what's right for my people. But joining the Lapid coalition, he became a target for the right wing. So Bibi Netanyahu, who initially talked about Abbas as the new hope, now made him the enemy. He's a terrorist in a suit. But the Abbas option is still there. The second party was Hadash, the former Communist Party. And Hadash said, we do not rule out being in the coalition, but we have a long list of terms. And we are committed to the Palestinian question. So if we join the coalition, we expect the coalition to make something on the Palestinian question. We won't come in without it. So the door was open, but with high demands. And apparently Lapid was talking with them. Maybe we could find some compromise. It looked like a long shot, but it was possible. The third party, Balad, was the most extreme one. And they said, we're not joining the coalition. We don't believe in the Jewish state concept. We have high demands. And whatever the results of the election will be, we will not recommend anyone for prime ministership. When we come to the president, we'll tell them we don't recommend anyone. These are the three options. Ram and Hadash have passed the threshold, Balad has failed. So that might tell something about the Arab citizens. And again, we will see in the future whether the fact that Mansour Abbas was part of the coalition is a precedent. It was the first time in Israel history you had an Arab party inside the coalition. So Mansour Abbas was in that sense revolutionary or a traitor, depends who you ask, but he made a very bold move and it's still on the table. So you have an Arab party who's telling the Jewish people, we want inclusion and equality, let us in. We'll see where that goes. The second issue that I want to discuss is the issue of religion. That is going to be very important in this elections, as the result is a very right-wing religious coalition, which might create many tensions within Israel. Why? Well, Israel for many years now is debated regarding the role of religion in politics. And Israel has been secularizing for the past 30 years. When I say secularizing, I mean that it has these trends which kind of defy religious authority. And there are two main reasons for these trends. One is economic. It's becoming a market society, a consumer society, which in many sense defies religion. So take for example the Shabbat. If 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the Shabbat was about closing all shops and shopping malls, now Shabbat is also a day for shopping. It's not ideological. It's part of being a consumer society. People who shop on Shabbat, if you ask them, what are you? They'll tell you, I'm traditional. I have a kiddush every Friday night. I will not eat pork. But shopping on Shabbat is okay for me. It's part of my leisure. So that's one change. The other is demography, the Russian immigration. That brought into Israel a large number of people who are, by religious Orthodox standards, not Jewish, and very secular in their way of life. So these are two major trends that kind of shook the structures of religion and politics in Israel. And this involved political and legal struggles in terms of Supreme Court decisions and attempts to legislate new laws, but mostly it was about the everyday life. So if you look at Israel in the past 30 years, we can see liberalization, albeit limited, but significant. Women's rights, LGBTQ, secularized places like said shopping malls on the Shabbat. But at the same time, we have religious resurgence. So it did become a battleground, but this battleground was fought mostly underneath formal politics. So religious parties in the parliament, despite the resentment of the changes, did not really try to block them. They tried to kind of carve themselves their own niches, not fight directly these trends. And we can think of that in the comparison between Naftali Bennett and the current Jewish right-wing party. Naftali Bennett, 10 years ago, had a project. He saw himself as a prime minister, not the way he became by accident, but by gaining power. Naftali Bennett took a party of the right wing who was like an old, archaic, non-chic party and tried to transform it. He had a very small kippah on his head. He comes from high tech. His wife is not religious. He served in the military, one of the top units. He was trying to create a right-wing party that will be inclusive. On the one hand, very strongly hawkish. So on the Palestinian question, he was totally right-wing, pro-settlement, against compromise, pro-stronger force against the Palestinians. But on the other side, he was quite pluralistic regarding religious issues. He was accepting other people. He would say, I can't condone gay marriage, but I think that gay people are my brothers. They were born with the blessing of the God. So I think they should have all the rights except marriage. That's a religious thing. So he was relatively liberal, but this party, despite the efforts, failed. It never took off the ground. So Naftali Bennett saw himself as replacing the Likud. He was almost a replica of Bibi Netanyahu. The way he speaks, his American accent, the top army units background, economically very neoliberal, but it never took off. Naftali Bennett remained in a small party that eventually dissolved. He became a prime minister by accident.
Why?
Why did it dissolve? Because two reasons. I think the people that he wanted to get from the not religious side did not come. They stayed with the Likud. So if I'm right-wing and not religious, Likud is good for me. And not enough passed. And from the other side, he was criticized for being not religious. So nicht hier, nicht daher, they say in English. Not here, not there. And that's why I think it failed. Now, he became a prime minister by accident 2 years ago. It was a very, very conjunctural thing that happened. Lapid could form a coalition, but he needed Bennett, so he gave him the right to be the first prime minister in the trade. But it was really an accident. And once he became prime minister, he lost more support. And that's why I think politically he's gone. He might come back, but it's hard to see him again in the role of a replacement Bibi Netanyahu. So this party was inclusive, liberal towards the Jewish people, hawkish towards the Palestinians. What we have now is a different party. Smotrich and Ben-Gurion are extreme right and very orthodox religious. When it comes to women's rights, to LGBT rights, they're very different from Bennett. So the religious right has almost disappeared in its traditional sense. The religious right in former coalitions and elections was very statist, very committed to the state institutions. Now we have a much more rogue party. Okay, Bennett was a member of a top unit in the army. Before they, the other people, neither Ben-Gurion nor Smotrich served in the military. They have a right-wing party whose two leaders have no military experience, no military credentials. That's a big change. So it's a more rogue party, very religious, very extreme right-wing, very different story. Now the ultra-Orthodox party, another important change. For years, the ultra-Orthodox have played the pivotal role of being the decider of the election results. Very instrumental. They came to elections and they said, we are representing the religious people, the Orthodox. We have a list of demands. We want to be exempt from the military. We want to have funding for education. We want to have this and this and that. And regarding foreign policy, we don't care. Make us an offer. We can be in coalition with the Likud, Labour Party, whatever makes us an offer. We're comfortable with that. But what happened in recent years, they have moved to the right. Now, there are two explanations to that. One is young people among the ultra-Orthodox who became very patriotic in a sense, very nationalist, very anti-Arab, still not serving the military, by the way, but with the ideology, they became very right-wing, and they lost their leadership. So 10 years ago, this trend was already there. But the leadership could say, well, we will tell you where to go. So on Shas, Rabbi Ovadia, Rabbi Shach for the Ashkenazi, they could tell their pupils, we decide the election results, not popular vote. So once the party gets its seats in the Knesset, go to the rabbi tells them, go here or go there. But no longer. Now the party politicians listen to their people. People have moved to the right. So on the one hand, they're now in a position of power, which is very, very tempting to use. But they lost their balancing option. Years ago, they could move left and right. Now they are right. Now, this has an advantage because now they're going to bring all new demands. But these demands might create tensions. And I can think of several tensions in that sense. For example, if you move to the right and you now are hawkish and pro-military, shouldn't you be serving the military? I mean, how do you resolve that paradox? So they're moving to the right has one disadvantage, discrediting their legitimacy in politics, at least in some sense. Secondly, if you combine together the right-wing party of Smotrich and Ben and the ultra-Orthodox, the whole balance that created in recent years might be in danger. And that might bring them into clash within their own coalition. Because the Likud supporters are much less religious. Okay, there are the people that go to the mall on Shabbat, that might have a gay son or daughter, that don't want to clash with other people. And this shift to the orthodoxy might create tension. So I said that this government is a stable government, a 64 majority with no one going anywhere. But there are several doubts about that stability. First, regarding the relations with other groups. How does government deal with Arab citizens, with secular Jews, with women? I mean, all these groups that have gained rights and momentum in recent years, will they give up on what they gained? I doubt that. Second thing is external. Already the US has signaled to this government its concerns. Netanyahu today told Smotrich that he cannot be defense minister because of US demands. Now, this might be Bibi using, his own tricks, but apparently there were concerns coming from the US that if Smotrich and Ben-Gurion have roles in the government, this might jeopardize Israel's relation with the US. And we're still with a Democrat president here, so that's another important thing. The EU has always been more critical of Israel, And Israel is considered biased partner. Nevertheless, Israel's trade with the EU is very important. So the EU, which has very favorable terms of trade with Israel, if it cancels these favorable trades, there will be extreme pressure on Israel. So the right-wing government might create havoc in terms of external relations. Third is the American Jewish community. And Israel has been in trouble with that for many years now. Netanyahu, I think it'll be fair to say that, about 10 years ago, has given up on the liberal part of the Jewish community. From Netanyahu's perspective, he can rely upon the evangelicals and the ultra-Orthodox. And if the other Jews in America have concerns with Israel, well, that's too bad. And you can see that with the movement of the wall, the way he treated that. So Netanyahu, I think, is very much aligned with other people in the US. This government might create even more alienation. So Smotrich and Ben-Gurion and the ultra-Orthodox, they really have no patience for Reform Jews, conservative Jews. They have no sympathy. That's another tension. Overall, I think that this government is going to create very many difficulties for different Israelis and people that support Israel. And that might be a point of the beginning for struggle. Because from my perspective, what we're looking for in Israel in the next years is how to create a shared society. This is a government about divisions between Arabs and Jews, between seculars and religious. And these divisions are, of course, a great concern for anyone living in Israel. And while in politics, we have seen a loss, and this loss, I think, will have consequences, I think civil society has something to say here. And I'm hoping that in the coming years, we will see more and more attempts from below to try and fight off these extremist trends against right-wing Kahanism in government, against ultra-Orthodox trying to impose their ways. And if we're lucky, we will be successful in at least preventing some of the harms the government might bring upon us. Thank you.
Why is the growing attacks on the Israelis right now?
The growing attacks
The growing attacks just yesterday,
in the territories.
they become really.
Well, I think these are if you read the reports of the military intelligence, they've been warning us for the past months that this is coming for them. And basically, in the West Bank now, there are two things. First, there's desperation. There's no hope. There's no future for negotiations. Abbas, in fact, is 87 years old, and apparently won't last much longer. There's no leadership to replace Abbas.
But he just went to hide,
Yes, because that's a strategy. Because if you don't negotiate with us, that's the other ways. I'm not trying to justify or not, but from the Palestinian perspective, I think that the dead end in political level will result in attempts to other ways to counteract that, either in Hague or in terrorism or in other things. But I think that I said that this was not the Palestinian question was not an issue in the elections. It hasn't disappeared. It's not going anywhere. So
explain what's happening right now. It's the last few months. Every day there is an attack, and sometimes in Yerushalayim.
oh yeah,
And can
but again, I think
repeat the question back?
sorry.
Can you repeat?
Yes, the question was about the attacks of Palestinians and recent attacks in Israel of Palestinians. I'm not justifying the attacks, of course. I'm trying to explain. So I think that the situation where Palestinians are pushed to the wall and there is no hope of achieving any stable peace, then the extremists on their side also will have their day. And again, if you read the military reports for the past year, we've been warned it's coming. We cannot block this. And these are individual acts.
But they're never negotiated with Israel. They're never ready to negotiate.
Well,
There's no process to negotiate.
well, we can argue about that.
The guy that just knifed, 3 people that day, he was actually got the license, to treat
Yes.
with Palestinians that came to work in Israel, and he was one of them.
I know, yeah, yes. I just get the question there, please. Yes, please.
Very picture of the Israelis as I can tell, Netanyahu is the only criminal in the government. There are two other convicted people who have been shown to be part of the Israeli.
Yeah, well, you could probably tell that I'm not a Netanyahu supporter. You know, I don't think you, but but in honesty, Netanyahu is not a criminal. He's not been indicted yet, so he's on trial. So you know, a person is innocent till proven guilty. So in that sense, I don't.
Two of them are already been
Yes.
proven guilty.
Yes, yeah, I agree. No, we can talk about corruption in Israel, and we do have a problem of corruption. But let me say in Israel's defense that we do put them in jail. So you could say Israel has a corruption problem because we found ministers and a president guilty of corruption and other things. But these people found themselves in jail. So the system works, at least till now. Now, can a person who's been in jail return to the government? It's a good question. I mean, it's an ethical, philosophical question.
There is somebody that did, what's his name?
Dale. Yeah, it's a question. Someone who committed a crime and paid the price. Can he come back to society? It's a good question. Can he be a minister? I don't think so, but the court thought otherwise. I mean, the court decided that Dale can be a minister despite his being convicted of what he was convicted of. So I see your point, but Netanyahu is not a criminal, at least not until he's indicted.
I also believe very strongly in the U.S. government feeling that there should be a separation of church and state. This is not going to exist in the Israeli cabinet.
No, but it never did.
Well, it was sort of
No.
for a while.
No, we never had church states, and I think we never will. I would like that to happen personally, but there is no option by any government in near future for church-state separation. It doesn't happen. It's a different system. It's not the same in the U.S.
One other people is until pro-Ukrainian, the Israeli government is not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good debate. So Israel on the Ukrainian front has been very, very, I would say, mild or neutral or wishy-washy.
Right, but we know why, they can't start.
They've got Russia and Syria. What else?
It's always a matter of choice. It's always a matter of choice. Yes,
And we're
Susie,
gonna
please.
have an online question next, and if you could
Sure.
repeat the question, all the questions, even the online ones, that would be.
Yes, I will.
Susanna, did you?
A question, Guy, towards the end, you were talking about I'm not sure, but other policies outside the government that are coming from, I guess, grassroots.
Yeah.
To create the shared society or better society. I'm really curious to hear more about that. That was hopeful.
Yeah, I had to end with some hope.
So repeat the
I think
question.
the question was about the grassroots potential, the hope that I had in the end. I think that now we're hearing in Israel more and more regrets of people that we haven't been active enough. We need to start to think about new ways to interact with other people. And this might emerge into, some civil society ideas, academic and non-academic, in which we'll try to think of new ways to run this country. I think the politics have been disappointing for many years now. It's been very divisive on the one hand, ineffective on the other hand. So I think many Israelis would like to, I'm not sure how many, I think there are notions that we need to have more cooperation between Arabs and Jews. I think that from my perspective, the neglect of Arab citizens, and I could predict that 10 years ago, is going to backfire on us. And I think more and more Israelis now realize that if we want to solve the issue of Arab society crime, we need to address the underlying grounds for that, and more officers and more jail We know that for other countries, it's not the solution. So it might be naive, might be just a glimpse of hope, but I think that the results of the election can be for many people very frustrating. So we were lost, and the demography is against us because we have so many children religious, and they're turned right wing and racist. I think that there's more nuances there. I was trying to say that, for example, that people that voted for Ben-Gurion, which is an aberration. Okay, that's a right-wing racist party, which years ago would be an outcast. I don't think everyone who voted for this party is necessarily a racist. And I think we need to start to find ways to talk with these people and bring them back to their senses.
So we have an online question specifically about how Jewish communities in the diaspora will deal with Smotrich and Ben-Gurion. Sorry, what's there? So looking at how the Jewish communities in the diaspora are going to deal with different Israeli people in the Knesset and other diplomats coming, people within politics coming to their communities based on what happened in February in England, if you could. So how will the Jewish communities respond, do you think, based on the outcome of this election? Sorry, that's a better word.
Yeah, I think that the Jewish community's response here, I mean, is more your answer than my answer. I can tell my hope, but I don't think I can give the answer. I think, and I've been teaching in American campuses for many years now, on and off, and the way that I've been feeling, the way that I've been experiencing this in recent years, that young American Jews are withdrawing from Israel.
Right.
It's not necessarily being anti, it's being just we don't want to deal with Israel. I mean, we're not anti, we're not pro, we're just not dealing with Israel. And I think, I can understand why. I think if you're a liberal American Jew and you believe in democracy and equality, and you see what Israel is advancing into, there's a good reason to say, well, I don't want to be any part of that. But there might be another answer that you want to reach out to people in Israel that share your views, to initiatives that you think, might create a different Israel. So I think the American Jewish community, has a choice to make individually and collectively, whether to withdraw or to find partnerships to make. I think that we're at a point where American liberal Jews and Israeli liberal Jews have much to talk about and try and advance things together. But again, that's my hope. I can't speak for the American Jewish community.
On the other hand, what right does the United States have in meddling with the government of Israel? It means it's the same thing as if Israel is telling the president of the United States how they should run the country.
And on top of it, who am I? I don't live in Israel, okay? Who am I to, we sit here and we criticize Israel. Who are we, the American Jews, to sit here and criticize Israel when we're not ready to pay the price to go live there and fight? Okay, that's enough. Everybody criticizes Israel, okay? Gosh, let's look at our government. My goodness, God help us, okay? That's enough. Okay, I'm tired of you, the American Jews. Well, let them go to Israel. If they don't like what's going on, let them go and change it. Enough to sit here and tell Israel, this is not good and this is good. Who are we to tell Israel what's good and what's not good?
Thanks. Let's give him a chance to respond. Yeah.
I hear you, and there is a point to that, but I'll say two things. That first, when you talk about issues like human rights, equality, I think these are universal issues. So I think if you're concerned with the plight of Palestinians, with inequality, then you have a right to criticize, like you could criticize with South Africa years ago, or with Ukraine now, with Russia. I think we as human beings have a right to criticize things in the world. That's one thing. Second, my perspective is for American Jews, I don't think it's about partnerships, not about criticizing. And the other side, the right wing, have no problems giving money to settlements. That's also being part of Israel. So if you're right wing and you give money to settlements, you give money to right organizations, then you're also involved. So why the other side should not do the same thing? So I think first on the issue of the balancing. And I think being on the left hand, as you can understand, in Israel, we tend to apologize all the time. We all the time apologize. Why do you cooperate with these people? Why do you bring in the American? The right wing has no such problems. Lapid had to apologize 10 times a day for dealing with the Arab parties. Netanyahu, in a glimpse, made Ben-Gurion legitimate. Never apologized. So I think in that sense, criticizing Israel is okay. We have a right to criticize anything we want. And the point, I think, is not so much criticizing, but thinking of, do American liberal Jews and Israelis with the same point of view have some common concern that they want to work together with? And again, I think all options are legitimate. Withdrawing, criticizing, or being partners. They're all options that people have to choose. I don't tell people what to choose. I mean, that's not my role.
And we have another online. Oh,
No, I was going to, let me,
please.
is there a path for the left to become relevant again in Israeli politics? Can you see a path, or is Israeli's government for the next generation or so either a mix of either far right or kind of centrist?
That's the $1 million question. And if I had the answer for that, I probably would know I've been doing something else. I think the left is in a very, very dire situation. The election results show that. Meretz disappeared. But I think the left does have some hope. It's able to create new partnerships. For example, the right wing has been very successful, as I said before, in making the crime issue a divisive issue. So we have to defend ourselves against Arab crime. But if we think of crime as a joint concern, where the fact that people who live in Rat, a town where across where I live, an Arab town, live in poverty, education is below the levels, and that's what causes crime in my community, then maybe we have a different way of thinking about the solution. So not more police officers, but better education, better jobs, and more inclusion. So I think in that sense, the left does have something to say. Will be able to convince people of what he's saying? I don't know. But I don't think the left doesn't have answers. Doesn't have an audience for the answer at the moment.
So someone asked online, will Smotrich, I don't know why I can't.
Smotrich.
Thank you. I don't know why I keep getting tongue-tied. Thank you. And Ben-Gvir give up on the demand for defense and public security ministries.
So I think Smotrich will not be the defense minister, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, Netanyahu has a very weird way of negotiating government, so anything can happen. The point is that the Netanyahu, although he's the largest party, they have a lot of power over him. Netanyahu's main concern is to stay out of jail now, to stop the trial. And basically, the deal with these parties is, we will support the way out for the trial for you. You will give us what we want. And that's why he's even considering making Smotrich the defense minister. Okay, a year ago, this would seem ridiculous. Okay, Smotrich has no credentials in that issue, no military background. He's a young man. He didn't serve in the military himself. He did like a 3-month service or something. So the audacity is kind of surprising. I think he will let Ben-Gvir be the minister of police, and that's a huge danger. And that's a huge danger.
Yes.
Because I mean, it's a delicate issue. It's an issue that requires a lot of patience. And it's a long-term battle. It's a marathon. And having a radical right-wing ex-Kahana person towards the police, I mean, this is a disaster in the making. So this is very, very concerned. So yes, I think Smotrich might not end up as a defense minister. By the way, that's less concerned. The defense minister, at the end of the day, has limited power. The military, has generals and has agendas, but the minister of the police, I think that's much more potent. Yeah.
So let me conclude with what we're about to wrap up with one last question, which is, do you foresee this coalition, assuming Netanyahu is able to bring it together and get the appointments, do you foresee it being something that's going to be stable for a chunk of time, or do you foresee there being lines that Netanyahu realizes can't be crossed, whether it's curbing rights for LGBTQ communities, things that some members of his coalition agitate for so severely that they end up walking away because he won't agree to that? Are there other red lines for him that might endanger this coalition long-term?
The late Shimon Peres used to answer every question with yes and no. That was the Peres.
Thank you very much.
Yes, the Peres, answer. Always good answer. So I think on the one hand, it's a stable coalition because the partners have nowhere to go and they're happy with having a right-wing government. Having said that, its stability depends on the orthodox and the ultra-right able to curb their enthusiasm. I'm not sure they can hold their enthusiasm. So if Netanyahu was able to make them more, I'm not sure the word is moderate, but make them more restrained, then this might last long. But if they push forward in terms of legislation against LGBT, or curbing the secularist way of life, or going face to face with the Arab citizens, that might end this government term. So I think Netanyahu has a very, very delicate task. It's a personal issues of the trial. He wants to have a legacy of a leader, and he wants to have an achievement, and he has partners that are very problematic. I mean, on the one hand, they're desirable, but they're very problematic. So I think he's happy with the government, but also dreading the way it might develop. But, so yes and no.
Perfect. Thank you.
And thank you everyone online.
Yeah, we can. Thank you everyone online.